Get out of the master suite, Eleanor. We need the natural light from my content. My daughter-in-law smirked, tossing my clothes into black garbage bags. She thought she had won. She had no idea I had already sold the house. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications if you love seeing entitled brats get exactly what they deserve. My name is Eleanor, and for 30 years I ruled my household with grace, dignity, and a killer recipe for lasagna. But apparently, in the eyes of my daughter-in-law, Jessica, I was nothing more than an unpaid intern in my own life. I'm 62, retired from a high-stakes career in corporate law, and I thought I had seen every shark in the ocean. Turns out, the deadliest shark was wearing Lululemon leggings and living in my guest room. It started 6 months ago. My son, Brandon, called me with a sob story about their condo in Seattle getting flooded. He said they needed a place to crash for a few weeks, while insurance sorted it out. Being a mother, I said yes. I opened my doors, my fridge, and my heart. Big mistake. Huge. Within a week, a few weeks turned into indefinite, and my peaceful colonial home in the suburbs turned into a chaotic content creation studio. Jessica is an influencer. I use quotes because I've never actually seen her influence anyone to do anything except lose their patience. She spends her entire day filming Get Ready With Me videos and rearranging my furniture to fit her aesthetic. I came home last Tuesday from my bridge club to find my living room unrecognizable. My vintage Persian rug, a gift from my late husband, was rolled up in the corner. In its place was a beige, shapeless monstrosity of a rug that looked like oatmeal. Jessica was standing in the middle of the room holding a ring light while Brandon was dutifully taking photos of her from a low angle. "Jessica," I said, trying to keep my blood pressure from skyrocketing, "where is my rug?" She didn't even look at me. She just flipped her hair and checked her nails. "Oh, hey, Elle. The red in that rug was totally clashing with the vanilla girl vibe I'm curating for my fall feed. We moved it to the garage. It's way too loud for the energy we're trying to manifest here." The garage. She put a $5,000 rug in a damp, dusty garage because it didn't match her Instagram feed. I looked at Brandon, waiting for him to step up. He's a 30-year-old man, but lately he's been acting like her accessory. "Mom, don't make a big deal out of it," Brandon mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Jess is just trying to modernize the place. You have to admit the house was looking a little dated." Dated? This house was a masterpiece of mid-century design, but that wasn't the point. The point was the disrespect. "This is my house, Brandon, not a set for a reality show," I snapped. Jessica finally looked up, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. "Okay, boomer, relax," she laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "We're doing you a favor. When you eventually pass this place down to us, the resale value is going to be way higher with my updates. Consider it an investment." That was the moment. That was the specific second the camel's back didn't just break, it shattered. She wasn't just staying here, she was waiting for me to die. She viewed my home, my sanctuary, as her future inheritance that she could start renovating early. She saw me as a temporary obstacle, a squatter in her future property. I took a deep breath. In my courtroom days, I never let the opposition see me sweat. I wasn't going to start now. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "You think this house is yours?" "Basically," she shrugged, turning back to her phone. "I mean, Brandon is the only heir. It's just a matter of time, right? Plus, we're already living here. Possession is 9/10 of the law, or whatever." She actually quoted the law to me. To me, a retired lawyer. The irony was so rich I could have choked on it. I looked at Brandon again. "And you agree with this?" I asked. He had the decency to look ashamed, but not enough to defend me. "Mom, look, Jess is just stressed, but she has a point. We're building our life here. It would be easier if you just let her take the lead on the decor.
Maybe you could stay in the in-law suite downstairs. It's quieter there, and you won't be in the background of her shots. They wanted to banish me to the basement, in the house I paid for, the house I scrubbed floors in to pay off the mortgage, the house where I raised that ungrateful boy. I felt a coldness settle over me, replacing the anger. It was the cold clarity of a strategist planning a checkmate. I see, I said, smoothing down my skirt. You want me out of the way so you can take over. Jessica gave a fake, sugary smile. We don't want you gone, Elle, just less visible. It's about the brand, you know? Your energy is a little heavy. Understood, I said, walking towards the kitchen. I'll stay out of your way. Jessica squealed and clapped her hands. Yay! Thanks for being chill about it, Eleanor. Oh, and can you make dinner tonight? We're having friends over for a collab. Something keto, please. I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared out the window at my rose garden. They thought I had surrendered. They thought I was a pushover old lady who would quietly fade into the wallpaper. They were wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was my old real estate agent, a shark named Marcus, who could sell ice to a polar bear. Marcus, I said when he picked up, it's Eleanor. Remember that offer you mentioned last year? The cash offer from that developer? Is it still on the table? I listened to his answer, and a smile spread across my face. A real, genuine smile. Good, I whispered. Drop the papers. I want to sell. Immediately. I hung up and walked back into the living room. Jessica was posing on my new beige sofa, and Brandon was adjusting the lights. They didn't even notice me. Enjoy the house while you can, kids, because the landlord is about to evict the tenants and the eviction notice is going to be legendary. This was just the beginning. I had a lot more planned than just selling the house. I was going to teach them a lesson about investment they would never forget.
The next 3 days were a masterclass in acting. If I hadn't been a lawyer, I probably could have made a decent living on Broadway. After the phone call with Marcus, I returned to the kitchen and prepared Jessica's requested keto dinner with a smile plastered on my face. I roasted salmon and asparagus, listening to the raucous laughter coming from the living room, where Jessica and her clone-like friends were filming a mukbang or whatever they called it. They treated me like invisible staff when I brought the food out. One of the girls, a brunette named Kinsley, who was glued to her phone, didn't even look up as I set a plate down in front of her. She just waved a hand and said, "Thanks, can we get some lemon wedges? It's for the aesthetic." "Of course," I said, my voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Anything for the aesthetic." I watched from the doorway as they rearranged the food I had just cooked, letting it get cold so they could get the perfect lighting. Brandon was sitting in the corner holding a reflector shield like a glorified production assistant. It was pathetic. My son, who had a master's degree in economics, was now a prop in his wife's social media circus. But I didn't say a word. I just went back to the kitchen, poured another glass of Cabernet, and texted Marcus. We set the appointment for Thursday morning. The next morning, the campaign to move me to the basement escalated. Jessica cornered me while I was drinking my coffee. She was wearing an oversized hoodie that cost more than my first car and holding a green juice that looked like pond water. "So, Eleanor," she started, leaning against the counter, "Brandon and I were talking, and we really think we should move your stuff to the downstairs suite today. I have a brand deal coming up with a skincare line, and the master bathroom has the best acoustics. We need to turn it into a permanent studio." The master bathroom? My bathroom, the one with the soaking tub I had installed after winning the biggest case of my career. She wanted to turn it into a studio for face creams. "That makes sense," I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. "You need the space to grow your brand. I understand." Jessica looked stunned. She had clearly prepared for a fight. She blinked, her fake eyelashes fluttering. "Wait, really? You're okay with it?"
Absolutely, I lied. In fact, I think it's a great idea to separate our living spaces a bit. I'll start packing my personal items immediately. Oh my God, slay! She squealed, doing a little shimmy. Thank you, Elle. You're literally the best. This is going to be so good for my mental health. I spent the rest of the day packing, but I wasn't packing to move downstairs. I was packing the things I actually wanted to keep. My jewelry, my legal degrees, the photo albums from before Brandon lost his spine. I boxed them up and labeled them basement storage to keep up appearances. It was grueling work, but every time I felt tired, I just looked at the beige rug they had forced into my living room and found a fresh reserve of energy. Thursday arrived, and with it, the next phase of my plan. I had told Brandon and Jessica that an estate appraiser was coming over. I spun a story about updating my will and needing a current valuation of the property to ensure they wouldn't get hit with massive taxes when I died. It's all for your benefit, I told them over breakfast. I want to make sure the transfer of assets is seamless for you two. They ate it up. Greed is a powerful blinder. They were so obsessed with the idea of their future inheritance that they didn't question why the appraiser looked remarkably like a high-end real estate shark. When Marcus arrived, he played the part perfectly. He walked through the house with the clipboard, nodding gravely as Jessica trailed behind him, pointing out her upgrades. We painted this wall chantilly lace to open up the space, she bragged, gesturing to a wall that used to be a warm sage green. And we're planning to knock down that kitchen wall for an open concept flow. It's very closed off right now. Marcus, bless his heart, didn't crack a smile. He said, "Interesting vision. The market certainly responds to modern touches." Exactly, Jessica beamed, looking at me with a triumphant smirk. See, Eleanor, even the professional agrees. I just nodded, playing the docile old lady. You kids know best. We ended up in the kitchen to sign the valuation papers. Jessica and Brandon lost interest as soon as the boring paperwork came out. Jessica went back to the living room to film a TikTok dance, and Brandon went to take a conference call for the job he barely paid attention to anymore. Is this it? I whispered to Marcus as I signed the document. It wasn't a valuation. It was a binding contract of sale. I was selling the house to a developer who planned to bulldoze it and build 2 modern McMansions on the lot. This is it, Marcus whispered, sliding the check across the granite island. 30-day closing, cash deal, no contingencies. You need to be out by the 5th of next month. Done, I said, pocketing the check. It was for a staggering amount, enough to buy a villa in Tuscany and never look back. They have no idea, do they? Marcus asked, glancing towards the living room where Jessica was currently trying to learn a dance move that involved a lot of hip rolling. Not a clue, I replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. They think they're inheriting a kingdom, Marcus, but they're just squatting in a teardown. As Marcus left, Jessica yelled out, "Bye, thanks for confirming our house value." I walked into the living room, the check burning a hole in my pocket. Jessica stopped dancing and looked at me. So, what's the verdict? Are we rich? The house is worth a lot of money, Jessica, I said, a genuine smile touching my lips. More than you can imagine. I knew it, she said, flipping her hair. God, I have such good intuition. We're going to be so set. Yes, I thought, walking towards the stairs to continue my fake move to the basement. The clock was ticking. I had 30 days to finalize my exit and drop the bomb. But first, I had to survive living in the basement while they paraded around upstairs like they owned the place. Little did they know, their reign was already over. The eviction notice wasn't written on paper yet, but it was written in stone. And the best part? I had one more surprise for them before I left. Something personal, because you don't mess with the lawyer's home and expect to get away with just a sale. I was going to make sure their reputation took a hit.
Life in the basement wasn't actually that bad. In fact, it was the most peaceful the house had been in months. While Jessica and Brandon stomped around upstairs like elephants in designer sneakers, I had created a cozy bunker of sanity down below. I had my wine, my books, and the comforting knowledge that their days of lording over me were numbered. But, of course, my solitude couldn't last forever. Jessica treated the basement door less like a boundary and more like a suggestion she was free to ignore. 2 days after the appraisal, she came clattering down the stairs without knocking, holding a mood board that looked like a Pinterest explosion. "Eleanor, we need to talk logistics," she announced, dropping onto my small sofa without asking. "Since the house is officially, valued and everything, Brandon and I want to throw a massive new era party. It's going to be my official launch into the home and lifestyle niche. We're inviting everyone, other influencers, brand reps, maybe even some local press." I set my book down, fighting the urge to laugh. A launch party. For a house she didn't own, it was too perfect. "That sounds ambitious, Jessica. When were you thinking of having this gala?" "In 3 weeks," she said, tapping a long acrylic nail against her chin. "Ideally, we want to do it right before we start the major renovations. Goodbye to the old theme. No offense." "None taken," I replied smoothly. 3 weeks. That was cutting it close. The closing date was exactly 28 days away. The developers were scheduled to take possession on the 1st of the month. If she threw this party a week before the closing, it would be the perfect crescendo to this disaster. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You should really go all out." Her eyes widened. She expected me to push back, to complain about the noise or the expense. "Really? You're on board?" "Completely," I smiled. "If this is going to be your home, you should christen it properly. Don't hold back on the budget. You have to spend money to make money. Isn't that what you influencers say?" "Yes, exactly." She practically vibrated with excitement. "I knew you'd get it eventually. Okay, so here's the thing. Since all our cash is tied up in investments, could we maybe use that credit card you added Brandon to last year? Just for the party supplies. We'll pay you back as soon as my brand deals hit." The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted to finance her party on my credit. A year ago, I would have lectured them on fiscal responsibility. Today, I saw an opportunity. "Go ahead," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "Consider it my contribution to your new career. But Jessica, make sure it's top tier. Don't embarrass the family with cheap decorations." She squealed and ran upstairs to tell Brandon the good news. I immediately picked up my phone and logged into my banking app. I lowered the limit on that specific card to exactly $5,000, enough to let them dig a hole, but not enough to ruin me. Plus, I plan to use that debt as leverage in the final act. Over the next week, the house transformed into a circus. Deliveries arrived hourly, cases of expensive champagne, custom balloons, a rented DJ booth. They were burning through money like they were royalty. I played the role of the supportive, slightly senile mother-in-law perfectly. I even helped them pack up more of my clutter to clear the main floor for the party. But while they were distracted with party planning, I was executing the second part of my revenge, the reputation hit. I knew Jessica's entire life revolved around her online image. She curated a persona of effortless wealth and kind-hearted wellness guru. The reality, of course, was that she was the slob who screamed at her husband and treated her mother-in-law like dirt. I decided it was time the internet saw the behind-the-scenes footage. I started leaving my iPad in strategic locations around the house, recording casually. I caught audio of her screaming at Brandon because he bought the wrong shade of white napkins. I filmed the pile of dirty dishes she left in the sink for 3 days while she posted about clean living. I even got a video of her kicking my elderly cat, Mittens, out of her way in the hallway. "Move, you walking furball," she had sneered, unaware the camera was rolling from the bookshelf. I was compiling a masterpiece, a day in the life that would destroy her sponsorship deals faster than she could say link in bio. But I wasn't going to release it yet. I needed the perfect moment. The tension broke 3 days before the party. I came upstairs to get a glass of water and found Jessica in the late husband's study. It was the one room I had asked them to respect. It still smelled like his pipe tobacco and old books. Jessica was standing on my mahogany desk, literally standing on it, in her shoes, trying to hang a neon sign that said, "Good vibes only." "Jessica," I barked, my voice losing its calm veneer for the first time in weeks. "Get off that desk." She jumped, nearly falling, and looked at me with annoyance. "Chill, Eleanor. We need a focal point for the VIP lounge. This room is going to be the VIP section. The lighting is moody." "This was my husband's office," I said, my hands shaking. "I asked you to leave this room alone." "Yeah, well, we need the square footage," she snapped, hopping down but leaving scuff marks on the wood. "Besides, he's dead, Eleanor. He doesn't care about the desk. You need to stop living in the past. It's creepy." The silence that followed was heavy. Brandon, who was taping up wires in the corner, didn't say a word. He didn't defend his father's memory. He didn't defend me. He just kept taping. That was it. The final shred of guilt I might have felt about selling the house evaporated. "You're right, Jessica. I need to stop living in the past. Thank you for the reminder." I turned and walked back to the basement. They thought I was retreating. In reality, I was finalizing the kill. I pulled out my phone and called the developer's office. I told the project manager, "Move the demolition crew up. I want the bulldozers parked on the street the morning of the 1st. I want them to see the equipment coming before they even wake up." The party was set for Saturday night. The closing and possession transfer was Monday morning. They were going to throw the bash of the century on Saturday, completely unaware that on Monday they would be homeless. And I had one final guest to invite to their party. Someone Jessica terrified more than anyone else, the IRS. Because looking at their business expenses on my credit card statement, I had a feeling her tax returns were about as authentic as her personality.
Saturday arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. The bass started thumping at 4 p.m. while the sun was still high, rattling the vintage crystal in my china cabinet. By 7 p.m., my driveway looked like a valet lot for leased BMWs. Jessica had hired a bouncer. Yes, an actual bouncer in a black t-shirt for the front door of a suburban colonial. He was checking names on an iPad, turning away neighbors who had lived on this street for 20 years while letting in packs of 20-somethings who looked like they were allergic to natural fibers. I was in the kitchen, tasked with managing the catering flow, which was Jessica speak for stay out of sight and make sure the ice doesn't run out. She had dressed me in a beige pantsuit she ordered off Amazon, telling me it was chic minimalist, but I knew it was just to make me blend into the walls like beige paint. Jessica, meanwhile, was wearing a sequin gown that looked like a disco ball had a fight with a fishing net and lost. She was running around with a microphone, live streaming to her fam. "Hey guys, welcome to the new HQ. We are literally vibrating with high vibes tonight." She shrieked into her phone, spinning around so fast she nearly knocked over a vase. Brandon was trailing her, holding a portable ring light, looking less like a husband and more like a hostage in his own home. Around 9 p.m., the crisis hit. The caterer, a stressed man named Paolo, cornered me near the fridge. "Mrs. Vance, we have a problem. The client requested 10 more cases of Dom Perignon for the VIP toast, but the card on file was declined." I fought the urge to cackle. The limit! She had hit the $5,000 wall I set. "Is that so?" I asked, feigning shock while arranging canapes. "That's odd. Maybe the bank flagged it for suspicious activity. You know how fraud algorithms are." "Well, she's demanding the champagne," Paolo sweated. "She's threatening to blast my company on Yelp if I don't produce the bubbles." "I'll handle it," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. I walked out into the living room, weaving through clouds of vape smoke and heavy perfume.
Jessica was by the DJ booth, screaming at Brandon over the thumping music. "Fix it, Brandon! My followers are expecting the champagne tower. It's the thumbnail for the recap video!" "I tried, Jess. The card is dead. Mom must have capped it," Brandon hissed, checking his banking app frantically. I stepped into their circle. "Is everything okay, children?" Jessica whipped around, her face flushed with alcohol and rage. Did you cut off the card? You're embarrassing me in front of the influencers from LA. "I didn't cut anything off, dear. That card has a credit limit. You must have spent it all on the decorations." I gestured to a tacky ice sculpture of her initials melting in the foyer, dripping water on my hardwood floor. "Perhaps you can use your own card, since you're so successful." The silence in the immediate circle was delicious. Her friends stopped dancing and looked at her. Jessica turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "My funds are tied up in crypto right now," she lied through her teeth, her voice high and pitchy. "Fine, forget the champagne. We'll do a tequila toast. Whatever, it's edgier anyway." She stormed off, her heels clacking aggressively. I watched her go, feeling a tap on my shoulder. It was Marcus, my real estate agent. I had invited him as a family friend, but really I wanted him to witness the circus before it left town. "Nice party," Marcus smirked, holding a sparkling water. Though I think the fire marshal might have a few citations to hand out for overcrowding. "Let them have their fun," I replied, taking a sip of my own drink. "It's a farewell party, after all." "Does she know yet?" Marcus asked, nodding toward Jessica, who was now dancing on my coffee table, shoes on. "Not a clue. She thinks she's queen of the castle." At 10 p.m., the speeches began. Jessica stopped the music and stood on the landing of the grand staircase. My staircase. She tapped the microphone, the feedback screeching through the room and making everyone wince. "Okay, everyone, listen up," she yelled into her phone. "I just want to say thank you for coming to christen our new forever home. Brandon and I have big plans. We're ripping out this dusty old vibe and bringing in the new. This house is going to be the epicenter of the Jessica Vance empire." The crowd cheered. Brandon clapped weakly, looking at the floor. Jessica looked down at me from the stairs, her eyes gleaming with malice. "And a special shout out to Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with fake syrup, "for realizing that it was time to step aside and let the next generation take the reins. Don't worry, Elle, we'll visit you in the basement sometimes." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Humiliation burned my cheeks, but I held my head high. "Step aside," she said. "Basement," she said. She had no idea that in less than 48 hours, she wouldn't even have a basement to visit. I retreated to the kitchen, my blood boiling. I found my iPad hidden behind the toaster, still recording. I checked the footage. I had clear audio of her admitting to tying up funds and bragging about exploiting the old lady's credit. It was gold. As the party wound down and the last of the glitter-covered guests stumbled out around 2 a.m., the house was a wreck. Cups everywhere, red wine stains on the cream carpet. The ice sculpture melted into a puddle. Jessica was slumped on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. "That was epic," she mumbled, not looking up. "We got so much engagement. Eleanor, you need to clean this up for tomorrow. I have a headache." "Leave it," I said, looking at the destruction. "It doesn't matter." "Excuse me?" She sat up, glaring. "It matters to me. I need a clean background for my morning detox story. Clean it up." "I'm going to bed, Jessica. You can clean your own mess." She gasped, but I was already walking away. I went down to my basement bunker and locked the door. I didn't sleep. I packed the last of my things, my clothes, my toiletries, the laptop. I sat in the dark, listening to them argue upstairs about who would take out the trash. Sunday was going to be the calm before the storm. But Monday was going to be biblical. I checked my phone one last time. A message from the developer: crew is prepped, 7 a.m. arrival. Police escort confirmed for eviction assistance. I smiled in the darkness. Good night, Jessica, I whispered to the ceiling. Hope you enjoyed the launch party, because the cancellation notice arrives at dawn.
Sunday passed in a surreal haze. The house smelled like stale beer and regret. Jessica spent the entire day in bed, nursing a hangover and posting throwback photos from the party, while Brandon passively pushed a vacuum cleaner around the living room, looking like a man serving a life sentence. I stayed in the basement, finalizing the last details. I transferred the funds from the house sale into a new, secure account that neither of them knew existed. I confirmed my flight to Tuscany for Tuesday evening, and I printed out a single document, the eviction notice. Monday morning arrived with a cold gray light. The silence of the house was broken at exactly 6:55 a.m., not by an alarm clock, but by the deep, guttural rumble of heavy machinery. I was already dressed in my best suit, sharp, tailored, commanding. I had my coffee in hand, standing by the basement window. I watched as a massive yellow bulldozer rolled down the quiet suburban street, followed by a pickup truck with the developer's logo and a police cruiser. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, rapid, panicked thuds. "Brandon, what is that noise?" Jessica's shrill voice pierced the floorboards. "It sounds like an earthquake. Go check!" I walked up the stairs, unlocking the door I had kept sealed all weekend. I emerged into the kitchen just as Brandon and Jessica were rushing to the front window. Jessica was wearing a silk robe, her hair a bird's nest. Brandon was in his boxers. "Mom, do you hear that?" Brandon asked, wide-eyed. I didn't answer. I walked past them to the front door and opened it wide. The bulldozer had stopped right at the edge of the driveway. The developer, a man named Mr. Henderson, stepped out of his truck holding a clipboard. Two police officers got out of their car and stood by the gate, arms crossed. "What is going on?" Jessica shrieked, running to the door. "Excuse me, you can't park that ugly thing here. We are influencers. This is private property." Mr. Henderson ignored her and looked at me. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance. We're ready to proceed as per the contract." "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I said smoothly. "Everything is on schedule." Jessica looked between us, her face contorting in confusion. "Mrs. Vance? A contract? Eleanor, what is he talking about?" I turned to face them. This was it, the moment I had waited for. "He's talking about the sale of the house, Jessica," I said, my voice steady and loud enough to be heard over the idling engine. "I sold it 30 days ago." The silence that followed was heavier than the machinery outside. Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brandon turned pale, grabbing the doorframe for support. You what?" Brandon whispered. "I sold the house," I repeated, savoring every syllable. "Effective today, this property belongs to Henderson Development. And since the new owners plan to demolish the structure to build condos, the demolition crew is here to start prepping the site." "Demolish?" Jessica screamed, the word ripping out of her throat. But this is my house. We just had the launch party. My studio, my aesthetic." "It was never your house, Jessica. It was my house. And you treated it, and me, like garbage. You thought you could push me into the basement and wait for me to die so you could cash in? Well, I decided to cash out first." But where are we supposed to go?" Brandon stammered, tears forming in his eyes. "Mom, we have nowhere to go." "I suggest you check a hotel. You have exactly 1 hour to remove your personal belongings before the crew secures the building. Anything left inside will be considered abandoned property. You can't do this! Jessica lunged at me, her hands clawing the air. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. My followers will cancel you. One of the police officers stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Ma'am, step back. This is a legal eviction. The previous owner has the right to sell. You are trespassing if you remain past the designated time. Jessica froze. The reality of the police presence finally hit her. She looked at the officer, then at the bulldozer, then at me. Her face crumbled. The arrogance, the entitlement, the bad bitch energy, it all dissolved into messy, ugly sobbing. Brandon, do something, she wailed, hitting him on the chest. Fix this. Your mother is insane. Brandon looked at me, his eyes pleading. Mom, please, just stop this. We can talk. We can fix the basement up nicer for you. Just tell them to go away. It's too late, Brandon, I said, feeling a pang of sadness that was quickly replaced by resolve. The papers are signed, the money is in my bank. This isn't a negotiation. It's a goodbye. I walked over to the kitchen counter where I had left a small envelope. Here, I said, tossing it to him. That's a list of local storage units. I suggest you start packing. You have 55 minutes left. I picked up my suitcase from the hallway. I didn't look back at the living room with the stained carpet. I didn't look back at the good vibes only neon signs still flickering in the study. I'll be at the airport, I told them. I'm moving to Italy. Don't look for me. I walked out the front door, past the stunned police officers, past the grim-faced construction crew. I got into the waiting taxi I had called. As we pulled away, I watched through the rear window. Jessica was running out onto the lawn, still in her robe, screaming at the bulldozer as if her voice could stop tons of steel. Brandon was sitting on the front steps, head in his hands. It was a chaotic, beautiful disaster. But I wasn't done yet. As the taxi turned the corner, I pulled out my phone. I had one final upload to make. The video compilation of Jessica's cruelty, the kicking of the cat, the screaming fits, the admission of financial fraud. I opened her favorite social media platform, created a burner account, and hit post. Caption: The real Jessica Vance, behind the filter. I leaned back in the seat and watched the view count start to tick up. 1, 10, 100. By the time I landed in Rome, she wouldn't just be homeless, she'd be viral for all the wrong reasons.
The Prosecco tastes better in Tuscany. 2 weeks later, the only noise disrupting my peace was the gentle chime of church bells echoing across the hills. I sat on the terrace of my rented villa, a stone farmhouse surrounded by olive groves, swirling a glass of vintage Brunello. The air smelled of rosemary and freedom. It was a stark contrast to the smell of stale vape smoke and desperation I had left behind in Seattle. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to witness the carnage. I had posted the video right before my phone went into airplane mode on the flight over, and I hadn't checked it since. I wanted the suspense to marinate. Now, looking at the screen, I realized I hadn't just dropped a bomb, I had nuked Jessica's entire existence. The video, titled "The Real Influencer Lifestyle," had reached 4 million views. The thumbnail was a blurry still of Jessica's face twisted in rage as she kicked my cat, Mittens. Mittens, by the way, was happily purring on the rug next to me, having flown first class in a carrier better than most apartments. I clicked on the comments. It was a bloodbath. The internet does not forgive animal cruelty or entitlement. She kicked a cat? Cancel her immediately, wrote one user with 50,000 likes. Another comment read, "Wait, did she admit to credit card fraud at 214? FBI, check this out." The brands were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship.
The skincare line she bragged about, they posted a public statement distancing themselves from her toxic behavior. The athleisure company dropped her. Her follower count was in free fall, hemorrhaging thousands by the hour. She had wanted to be famous, and I had granted her wish. She was now the most famous villain on TikTok. My phone buzzed. It was Brandon. I had ignored his first 50 calls, but today, with the sun warming my face and a belly full of pasta, I felt generous. I tapped answer. Mom? His voice was cracked, sounding like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, please tell me you're there. I'm here, Brandon, I said, taking a sip of wine. Italy is breathtaking this time of year. You really should visit. Oh, wait. That costs money. Mom, this isn't funny, he sobbed. We are ruined. Jessica is having a breakdown. She can't leave the motel room because people recognize her and shout things. We're at a Red Roof Inn, Mom. A Red Roof Inn. Well, it's a roof, isn't it? Better than the street? The police came, Mom, he continued, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. Because of your video. They're investigating the credit card usage. They think she committed identity theft against you. And the IRS sent a letter to the old house address, which got forwarded to our P.O. box. They're auditing us for the last 3 years. I smiled. The tax tip. It was the gift that kept on giving. I can't say I'm surprised, Brandon. You can't spend money you don't have and hide income you didn't earn. That's Economics 101. Didn't you learn that in grad school? She blamed you, he said, sounding defeated. She told the cops you gave her permission, but then they saw the video where she brags about tricking the old hag. Mom, she's gonna get charged. I might get charged as an accomplice. Then I suggest you get a lawyer, I said, my voice hardening. A real one, not one of her influencer friends. Can't you help us? He begged. Please, just wire us enough for a deposit on an apartment. We have nothing. The storage unit fees are due and we're going to lose the furniture. Even her ring light is being repossessed. I looked out at the rolling green hills. I thought about the beige rug. I thought about the basement. I thought about the waiting for her to die comment. No, Brandon, I said, softly but firmly. I am retired. My assets are frozen in a trust that you can't touch. And frankly, I'm enjoying my retirement too much to bail you out of a mess you watched her create. You stood by and let her treat me like a servant in my own home. You chose your side. Now you have to live with the consequences. Mom, please. Goodbye, Brandon. I have a cooking class in 20 minutes. Learn to cook, son. It's cheaper than ordering out. I hung up and blocked the number. It was the final severance of the cord. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. I wasn't just a mother or a mother-in-law or a victim anymore. I was Eleanor, and Eleanor had a date with a charming, silver-haired vineyard owner named Alessandro later that evening. I closed the laptop, shutting out the noise of their destruction. The video would circulate forever, a digital monument to their greed. Jessica would never be an influencer again. She would be a cautionary tale. Brandon would have to learn to stand on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life. I picked up Mittens and scratched her behind the ears. Well, girl, I whispered, we did it. We cleaned house. Mittens meowed in agreement. I raised my glass to the horizon, to new beginnings, to self-respect, and to the sweet and intoxicating taste of justice served cold. The eviction was permanent, and my vacancy sign was turned off forever.